Back in the underground lab today. So, figured out how to get the SSD mounted. Could never get the SD card to work. So what we gotta do is mount this SD that I had laying around, solid state drive. Put it in there, kind of like that. And then this flips over, sits on the top. And these wires basically coil down precariously like that, and it works enough to get something installed. So we're gonna try that. We're gonna get it put back together, and we're gonna give it an install, see what it does. Starting the pfSense install. Here we go. Alright, so let's see if it gets further than last time. So we're going to accept these settings, quick easy install. Yep. Alright, here we go. Yep, it's doing work. Alright, we'll come back when it's finished. So this is the default config for pfSense. It's on 192.168.1.1 /24 subnet. So I'll use that to connect to the LAN interface to my computer. I'll configure it for an address in that range. Apply. Restart the interface. Comes back up. Should be connected now. Yep, I understand the risks. Okay, so the username and password is going to be admin and then pfSense. Alright, so this is the initial setup wizard that you get when you first log into the web interface. Yeah, I'm not going to purchase pfSense Gold. So I'll just accept all these default settings, but here you can enter in the host name if you wanted to change it, the domain name if you had one, DNS servers that you'd rather use than your ISP. We're going to leave this the same. I actually have a config from an old pfSense install that I'm going to use to replace all this stuff, so we're just going to accept all the default stuff. Next. Admin password. It does force you to change the admin password, so I'm going to change that real quick. So I changed the password, and it's up and running fine. I finished this a few weeks ago, and didn't make any videos since then. Took a little while to get a network connection to it. For whatever reason, I had to make a crossover cable to go from my ISP's connection to my pfSense box. Depending on your ISP, you may or may not need what equipment they're running. You may or may not need to do that as well, but that's something to keep in mind. As I said, it's been running for a few weeks, and other than a couple reboots for something else, I haven't had any problems with it really. pfSense did have an update recently. It's running 2.3. So I updated to the 2.3 release. They polished up the interface, the dashboard a good bit, and how you interface with web pfSense. it looks great. There's one thing I miss. I'll get into that in a minute. But as far as this little box goes, it is quite a trooper. The dual core Atom Intel Atom processor runs great. It is a little hot, so it runs. I'll have a temperature sensor that I'll look at it every once in a while, and it runs about 115 degrees on the outside of the box, which is perfectly fine for an embedded machine like this. If you're not used to working with those machines, you may think it's getting hot, but it's just fine. You can see all my interfaces are up, and they're rock solid. I don't have any problems with them. One thing you can tell on the dashboard that I have installed is PF Blocker NG, which is a IP filtering tool, to where even if you have ports open, it won't allow connection from whatever IP lists you have installed. And I keep an eye on what kind of traffic was hitting my router before I did this, and it was pretty interesting to see a lot of potentially malicious traffic coming from countries and all over the world. It's pretty interesting. If you've never had a router with enough logging to look at stuff like that, it's really interesting once you actually start looking at it. CPU usage is pretty much always less than 5%. It never uses a whole lot. Unless I'm updating something or installing a package, it hardly ever spikes very much. Memory usage pretty good, 10% out of 2 gigs. No swap usage. 7% out of what's a 16 gig hard drive. So this is running on a 16 gig SSD, and that's it. I don't know, I haven't checked the price of 16 gigs SSDs in a while, but they're probably pretty cheap considering you can get a 250 gig for around $100 right now. So this is really light when it comes to what kind of system resources you require. This is the one thing I'm kind of bummed about in the newest update for pfSense. They call this the monitoring tab. This replaced the RRD graphs. Those graphs had a really cool feature because they'd show you the total traffic or the total. That's what I used it for. I used it to look at the total traffic on my interfaces and see how much data I'm going on my connection. Not because my ISP limits it, but just because I'm curious. I like to see what my different interfaces are pulling because they each do different things. So that was really easy to keep track of with the RRD graphs, but now this new monitoring tool, although it does all kind of really cool shiny stuff and it's very flashy, it doesn't give me a total of what it is, and that all of it's overkill, but that's all I'm looking to get out of it. Other users may think this is just fine for what they use, but but it is cool. You can the graph is interactive, and if this wasn't a screenshot, I could show you, but you can scroll across the axis of the graph and get these numbers change, and you can it'll show you what the traffic was like at that particular point in time on the graph, and you can change the timeline of the graphs to get 1 month or a day or 4 years or however long you've had this thing installed, the pfSense box installed. So overall, it's really cool. Although I did have some hiccups with it leading or coming from trying to use a CF card. I found out there are some issues with getting pfSense and BSD Linux in general installed on CF cards. So my advice, if you get this box that I got, go get a solid state drive. Small one, 16 gig, that's all you need, and install it with that. And then once you get it installed off of a thumb drive or something like that onto the SSD, and you get your box all put together, try to get your internet connection, try to get the connection from your ISP. Might need a crossover cable, might not, depends on what equipment your ISP is running. And then go crazy with it. Go get it configured. Watch the logs. Keep track of who's connecting to your network, and do fun stuff with networking. So that's it.